interfacing with reality. It's a common phrase, interface. It means a point where two systems or organizations or subjects meet and interact. Sometimes it's rewarding, sometimes it's not so happy, because the points of contact are always the place where things happen. And we have to interface with the people and things around for things to happen. So when we discuss what this interface is, we will see the various levels that we need to go through. Reality. The dictionary meaning of reality is the state of things as they exist, as opposed to idealistic or notional ideas about them. Things as they exist, this is what is the reality. Yeah. But it sounds so narrow for the simple reason they follow the principle: what you can't see cannot be understood. So, what you see and experience is the reality. Reminds me of the old philosophical school in India called Charvakas. Charu Vakya, that is beautiful words. They were the old materialists. Of course, philosophically, they never stood a chance against the other 6 systems of Indian philosophy. But they never really died out. They are still here in a very grand way, and we are sometimes so materialistic in our outlook of reality. Now, that being said, one's conceptions of reality molds one's personality, and this personality interacts with the external world, interfaces with the external world. So, our conceptions, if they are narrow, our personalities are going to be narrow, and our interactions also will be narrow. So, we have many things that we don't see. Take for instance space, time, and for that matter consciousness, but we can understand it through the effects. So, the principle what you can't see, cannot be understood, can be kind of dismissed in a way. There are many things that are invisible, and yet they form part of the reality. We even talking about the subtle worlds. We are just talking about this world and things which act on this world. Okay. So, let's go into a little of philosophy. I'll give you a kind of synoptic view of it. Our world view, we have, each one of us has a world view, and it depends on 3 broad areas: ontology, epistemology, and axiology. I'll explain this slowly. Ontology is the study of being, and also related subjects such as existence, becoming, etc. So, this is under ontology, worldviews. There are 3 again broad divisions. One is, this world is all that we know and can understand and we can manipulate. This is the materialistic or the scientific worldview. It's rational, these are the things that are there here. The second is dualism. That is, there is matter, of course, and there is something called a spirit. Both interact. And the third is, it's called immaterialism, not materialism. They say this world is spirit. Now, these are the three worldviews. Depends on which side you're on. But generally, these are taken as three broad divisions. The philosophical implications of science and materialism also is something called humanism or naturalism. This is everything that we see. We don't need to get anything from outside. No external causal factors to explain things. This, if it is clear, then we can proceed. So, this is one side of ontology. Of course, the ramifications are vast. We don't need to go through it. The second is epistemology. It is the method, the means, and the validity of knowledge. How do our senses and the mind apprehend or grasp this external world? What is valid perception? What is invalid perception? Because though we have senses, these senses are subject to illusions. So, this branch of, again, metaphysics also delves deep into what is valid knowledge. And in Indian philosophy, Vedanta, we have 6 ways of knowing. How do we know? So, this is epistemology. Third is axiology. It is the study of the values or categorization of values. Good or bad, right and wrong, etc. We get the idea. So, these 3, they form part of our worldview. Most of us don't think in that way, of course. It's more instinctive or more like a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to questions such as these. How do you know? Oh, I know. But how? No. So, it's just taken for granted. But that is not the way to understand reality. You have to discern. You've got to be you need to understand how things are perceived and what I perceive. Okay. Just to give you a kind of a scale of things. Now, this earth which we love so dearly, of course there are some who don't love, is just a speck of dust, a tiny mote of dust floating in the vast immensities of space, which is dark. Now, if you, and this is the reality, now if you can integrate this knowledge within yourself, you have proceeded far in understanding reality. I want you to just conceptualize this. It is a reality, but our minds just can't comprehend it. Just a speck of dust floating in this vast expanse of space. Imagine. And we are not just talking about a solar system. We just, the solar system itself is nothing, a speck of dust in some kind of corner of another huge galaxy. What, where, why? So, these are the questions of concerning reality. There is a story in the Hebrew Bible which I really liked when I first heard it. It is a story of Jacob. Jacob was one of the descendants of Abraham. He had his twin brother I think, Esau. And they had they were quarreling amongst themselves, etc. And so Jacob had fled that place, of his ancestral place, and his brother was trying to follow him with men in order to kill him. So Jacob, when he was stationed in a place, he sends his two wives, his children and his servants, etc., across the waiting alone. This is important. As the night progressed, he saw a man who challenged him. And Jacob took up this challenge and he started wrestling with this man. Now you know what wrestling is. But Jacob wrestled with this man the whole night. I mean, we have 3 minutes, 9 minutes and you're done. But Jacob manifested the tremendous strength and we find when it was dawn, Jacob asked that man, "What is your name?" So the man says, "Why do you ask my name? What is your name?" Saying, "My name is Jacob. Bless me." Bless me in the sense of give me something. And the man says, "Let me go, for the day has broken." Jacob said, "I will not let you go before you bless me." And then the man says, "What is your name?" Jacob said, "I am Jacob." The man says, "Your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." So he was wrestling with not just a man, because he understood that this person who is wrestling with me is no ordinary man. It cannot be an ordinary man. And then again Jacob says, "Please tell me your name." He didn't, but the man blessed him. And so Jacob was called Israel. Then Jacob says, after he had fought with that man the whole night, then he says, he called his name Peniel, and he says, "For I have seen God's face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." There's a belief that if you can't see God face to face and survive. This is a story that encapsulates the entire talk. So he wrestled with God. We have to wrestle with reality. Use the old word God. You've got to wrestle with reality. This is the interface. You have to grapple with the reality. And before you can grapple with the reality, you call it God, you have to be divested of all possessions, because he had sent all his wives and possessions and children away, and he stood alone. When you stand alone, you are tested. That is your real strength. Because we think possessions embellish us, and actually all these possessions make us weak. When your ego becomes big, reality becomes small. And when your ego becomes small, the reality becomes big. So when you have learned to divest yourself, your ego, of everything and stand naked as it were, now you wrestle with God. Now your ego, you'll wrestle with. This is the moral of the story. It's a beautiful story. When I first heard it, oh, yeah, you've got to wrestle with God the whole night. And the story goes that when that man's God now, he saw he couldn't prevail over Jacob, he touched him on his hip joint and loosened it. And so Jacob was fighting also, wrestling also with his dislocated hip. Sometimes you interact with the reality, you don't come out unscathed. You come with something, maybe a disability, but you have attained something which is great. So he's saying, because you have wrestled, you have fought against men and God, and you have prevailed. This is another point. Before you can grapple with reality, you've got to grapple with the smaller realities. You have to grapple with innumerable smaller and smaller till you become strong enough to grapple with the reality as it is. This is the moral of this old story. It's very inspiring. We think, oh, God and reality, what happened? And we don't want to engage with it. We need to grapple with it, to interface. This is called the interface with reality. Vedanta says, okay, that's a beautiful, this is a beautiful story. I think most of you have heard of it. Okay. Vedanta will say, yeah, the story is appropriate, but the orientation could be different, internal. So when Jacob grappled with God and men, that is, there are two sets of realities here before you can grapple with God. One is the external and one is the internal. So the external comprises of life, we interact with everybody. Life interacts with itself. And relationships, this and that, and we have been grappling with our own life and grappling with life all around us. Now, this does not mean only just family and friends and this, but the entire world, because everything has life. And in the process, we have been kind of not very happy about it, because we have been struggling and struggling and struggling with our lives and also as we interact with other lives. Because this is what it is. And regarding the external life, we find that always we have tried to exploit, take something which belongs to us. We have not given anything. We have interfaced with everybody. Either we come away sour, or we have come away with appropriating something which should not belong to us. So this external world, we have been exploiting it to a degree where now we are paying the price for it. So the next level of interface is mind. We interact with minds. We not only interact with life, but we interact with minds. Our interaction is more on the mental, you can say, level. And here also we find at times we have been cheated, or we have been cheated, or we are cheating. We come with lies. We cannot face the truth. We somehow interface with other minds, but sometimes comes away from the interface impoverished, not enriched. And then we interface with other people's intelligence. There's a big difference between just minds and intelligence. In fact, we judge people by their intelligence. I mean, not simply intelligence which is kind of practicalized in this external world. And then we have been interfacing with people's emotions. So here we have a constant struggle that's going on at different levels. After that, and this is what we need to engage in. We need to interface with this. Like Jacob, he interfaced, he fought with men and with God. The next biggest interface we have is our own ego. That is something, it's like we talk about ego clash. I remember we used to meet these great Swamis. There was who later became the president of the order, Swami Ranganathananda. So he used to tell us, he tell us many things. One of the things I remember is, so we are like billiard balls, we bump into each other, and we don't enter into each other. Our interactions are just kind of like billiard balls, hit round and round. So this ego, to understand it, it's incomprehensible. It is so kind of subtle, and we don't know how it operates. Here Carl Jung, he speaks about integrating the shadow self. If you've read any of his kind of works, he speaks about integrating the shadow self. What the ego does is it separates itself, distances itself from that shadow self. That shadow self is not just static. That is a place where it operates, but it operates now through dreams and archetypes. It pushes. This shadow self is distanced because the ego does not want to integrate itself with that. But that's the whole thing. You've got to integrate this. This is that subconscious, as Carl Jung says, the subconscious. Okay, that being said, and the whole thing is, if you can, then you have interfaced with your self. You have integrated yourself. In Vedanta will say further, it's not just one life interacting with lives and minds and intellects and egos and emotions. Vedanta will say one thought has to interface with another thought, with another emotion, with your own sense of, you can say, separateness, the shadow self and the ego. One has to start integrating, interfacing with each thought. In the yoga aphorisms, it's called Pratipaksha Bhavanam. Vitarka Bhadane Pratipaksha Bhadanam. In order to control the mind, the sage Patanjali says, one must bring in contrary thoughts. A thought arises, you bring in the contrary thought that will lock that. Something like this Hegelian dialectics, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is nice. Even the Bhagavad Gita says, Uddhared atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva atmanabandhu atmaiva ripuratmana. One should raise oneself by oneself. One should not lower oneself. For verily, oneself is one's own friend and one is one's own enemy. So this is just the beginning of the chapter on meditation, where the Lord tells you, one has to raise oneself by your own self. You raise yourself, that is, you raise your mind by your own mind. That is what is meant. So we have to, Vedanta says, we have to counter, struggle, interface with what? Ignorance. We simply, I just mentioned, we are just like a speck of dust floating in this massive ocean of dark space. And yet, we know this is real, yet we are so blinded. This is actually what is called ignorance in Vedanta. Somehow, this knowledge is not being integrated within you. People say, what is ignorance? What is ignorance? This. And Vedanta is very clear. This is. It's simply, why? Because there's no place there. So, let me sum today's talk up with a small incident in Sri Ramakrishna's life. Okay. In where he used to live in Dakshineshwar, near Calcutta, during the rainy season, and rain in Bengal, it doesn't rain, it pours. So during the rainy season, you had grass growing everywhere. So the proprietors as well as the management decided that people can come and cut the grass to be used as fodder for free. Okay. And people used to come, especially those who used to run their own dairy, their dairy farm. They used to come cut the grass and take it. So one day, Sri Ramakrishna saw an old man. He had cut so much grass, it's free, see? And he had made it into a bale, and he was trying to lift it on his shoulders. And he was struggling. Sri Ramakrishna was looking at it. He could have just reduced the quantity of grass and then could have lifted up. But no, his greed did not let him reduce that burden. So he was struggling and struggling. Sri Ramakrishna looks at him and says, the Atman, the embodiment of infinite knowledge, exists within, whereas there is so much foolishness and ignorance outside. O Rama, how inscrutable is thy Maya. And he goes into Samadhi. Now this gives us an idea that this Atman there within is all knowledge. And I've been trying to inculcate this idea. Just think of yourself as kind of spirit, kind of a light. It's all there. And yet, outside, like Sri Ramakrishna says, so much foolishness and ignorance outside. There's knowledge, the Atman within. Embodiment of infinite knowledge. How do we integrate this into our lives? This is the question I leave you with. Now, I've given you the pointers. Now it's up to you to wrestle, like Jacob did. Wrestle with the world, with yourself. Not violently, of course. And then, only then, we become competent to wrestle with the reality. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.